各位傳媒朋友，早晨！多謝大家今朝嚟呢個記者會。因為疫情關係咧，請大家記者會入邊咧都係盡量保持距離嘅。今天早上咧，行政長官係冇開場發言，我哋而家直接進入提問嘅時間。請希望提問嘅記者先舉手啦，嗌到你之後咧，先介紹你係傳媒機構，然之後用我哋俾你嘅咪發問啦。右上邊前排間條衫嗰位男記者。
林太咧，我係眾新聞嘅。民陣解散嗰度咧，警方就話會繼續調查啦。即係大陸嘅官方傳媒咧，都即係俾即係公開講咗話，希望要繼續調查啦。但係其實警方同民陣咧係保持咗工作關係10幾年，即係直至到2019年818嗰個集會咧，其實警方都同佢有溝通。你之後咧都利用當時嗰個集會咧，推動當時嘅即係嗰個對話。即係如果所謂縱容民陣，即係要問責嘅話咧，其實警隊甚至你本人係咪都有呢個責任咧？即係而家你仲可唔可以即係對住全港市民講話香港係有集會嘅即係自由咧？即係喺即係甚至限聚令都冇放寬咧。第二咧就係嗰個抗疫嗰度咧，就係即係我留意到個宏觀嗰個國際形勢咧，譬如講以色列即係即使佢哋有60%嘅人口都係打咗疫苗。即係80%嘅成年嘅人咧都打咗疫苗，但係嗰個數字咧都係即係上升緊嘅，同埋佢哋都要打翻一個即係嗰個 boost， 所謂嘅 booster shot， 即係要再補打翻嘅咁樣。咁其實即係參考翻呢個例子咧，其實即係香港政府而家出盡力咁去打即係呼籲啲市民打疫苗咧，其實去到頭來嗰個策略會唔會都係有佢個局限咧？即係宏觀嚟講，其實我哋咪要調整翻個目標，即係唔再以呢個所謂清零作為一個目標，而係即係學習下點樣長期同呢個疫苗長期同呢個病毒共存咧。唔該。
好多謝兩個問題。第一咧就係關於呢個民陣嘅解散嘅問題咧。有人係將佢聯繫到喺香港嘅自由啊。示威啊、遊行嘅自由，所以我咧就希望能夠俾一個全面嘅回應。第一咧就係喺基本法之下，言論、新聞、出版、結社、集會、進行遊行、示威，甚至組織參加工會嘅自由咧，都係受到基本法嘅保障嘅啊。咁所以呢啲個別嘅社會團體近日自己自願自動咁解散，係完全同呢個自由咧係冇關嘅。所以對於有啲外國嘅政客或者係一啲外媒咧，每見到呢啲嘅事件嘅發生，就將佢係聯繫到話係有人打壓自由，呢個係非常之偏頗嘅評論，所以特區政府咧係唔會接受嘅。第二個點我想講咧，我喺呢度都反覆強調過好多次，上述所講嘅人權同埋自由咧，唔係絕對嘅。呢個唔係絕對，亦都唔係淨係適用於香港特別行政區嚇。放諸四海，個人嘅自由唔係絕對嘅，都係依法享有嘅。佢係可以受到一啲更加重要嘅目的咧嚟到規範。呢啲更加重要嘅目的，第一個當然係國家安全。另外就係我哋近日或者呢1年幾以嚟，即係經歷過嘅公共衛生。第三呢，亦都係有一啲所謂公共道德係會規範個人嘅行為嘅。咁所以喺我哋講人權自由嘅同時呢，都要先接受呢係有呢個基礎。不過即使如此呢，喺保護或者維護國家安全嘅時候，亦都同時間係要尊重同埋維護人權同埋自由，呢個就喺國安法裏邊嘅第4條咧寫得非常之清楚。唔少人都係評論呢個國安法相對於其他好多外國嘅國安法咧係更加尊重人權同埋自由，因為佢寫咗喺國安法嘅第4條，就係話特區政府或者特區喺維護國家安全嘅時候係應當尊重同埋保障人權，依法保護香港特別行政區居民。根據基本法，即係我剛才講嘅第27條啦，同埋一啲人權公約適用於香港所有嘅人權同埋自由嘅。但係有一樣事實擺喺眼前，呢個就係我想講嘅第3點咧。自從舊年6月30日全國人大常委會頒布咗國安法喺香港實施以嚟，呢1年多以嚟咧， 我哋睇到呢條國安法嘅效用，唔單止係處理2019年下半年開始發生嘅黑暴，唔單止咧係喺香港止暴制亂，所謂嘅定海神針啦。事實上，亦都係令到特區可以貫徹一國兩制，定下咗一個非常之重要嘅基礎。咁換句話說，以前我哋都話，即係危害國家安全或者唔符合效忠香港特別行政區，呢啲係紅線嚟嘅，係唔應該觸碰。但係都好多社團、好多嘅人士咧，就係肆意去觸碰呢啲紅線。但今日有咗國安法呢個法律嘅基礎咧，呢啲團體同埋個人就唔能夠唔接受。而家佢哋嘅言行咧係受到呢條重要嘅法律嘅規管。當然亦都係透過呢條法律咧，賦予咗俾香港特別行政區相關嘅部門，包括警務處成立咗國安處，同埋律政司咧有關於國家安全檢控嘅部門咧，我哋係有呢個能力去貫徹呢個國安法嘅要求，去對於所有觸碰紅線、犯咗國安法嘅團體同埋人士咧，係採取呢啲行動。咁所以喺呢個大前提之下，呢一類以往係好肆意觸碰紅線嘅社團同埋人士咧，我自己認為咧，佢哋選擇喺呢個時候自動結束或者解散咧，係唯一嘅選擇啊！所以係同行使自由言論係冇關嘅嚇。咁但係正如執法部門嘅首長都講啦嚇，自動解散咗一個曾經觸犯紅線嘅社團咧，唔係等於係一個免責條款嚟嘅。有關嘅機構仍然係會按住法律嘅要求去搜集證據同埋作出調查。如果係有違法嘅行為咧，亦都會由檢控嘅部門咧嚟到去獨立作出呢個決定，是否係進行檢控。呢個就係而家嗰個情況。你又嘗試去翻舊帳嚇，話唔係喎，以前啦，你哋同好多呢啲而家認為係觸碰紅線嘅機構或者係組織咧，都有一啲嘅接觸嚇，甚至都有一啲嘅互動。但大家都記得啦，我都講過啦，過去2年幾經過咗黑暴同埋國安法咧，整個香港係上咗好深刻嘅一課，包括特區政府，包括我本人。我哋而家認清咗香港嘅複雜嘅環境，認清咗香港喺冇國安法嘅保障之下呢，係會成為一個顛覆特區政權、危害國家安全嘅橋頭堡啊！亦都認清楚好多以前我哋都係好願意同佢互動嘅團體嚇，甚至有啲我哋都尊重，讓佢參與公共事務嘅團體，例如教協，佢嘅本質係乜嘢嘢？咁所以而家我哋回到去正軌，嚟到去全面貫徹落實呢個國家安全同埋維護一國兩制喺香港嘅實施呢，我覺得係應有之義，亦都會為香港帶嚟長治久安。或者再又拉開啲講呢，就係香港事實上係有好多嘅公民嘅團體，好多嘅專業組織，好多嘅學生嘅團體啦嚇。我哋都係鼓勵咧，係香港一個多元嘅社會嚇，但係佢哋每一個都應該按住佢哋嘅宗旨，喺唔違反法律之下咧嚟到去運作。但係如果呢啲團體俾我哋知道佢已經係偏離咗佢嗰個宗旨嚇，譬如一個專業團體應該係做專業嘅事，但係佢唔係做專業嘅事，佢係俾政治騎劫咗或者凌駕咗佢嘅專業咧。咁特區政府嘅唯一嘅取向咧，就係同佢終止關係。早前嘅香港教育專業人員協會，我哋亦都係教育局咧，係有需要咧同佢終止關係。如果日後有其他嘅專業團體，包括近日喺坊間講得好多嘅香港律師會，亦都係被政治凌駕咗佢哋嘅法律嘅專業咧，特區政府同樣會考慮同佢終止關係。而同香港律師會嘅關係咧，更加係深遠嘅，因為畢竟咧佢係香港一個重要嘅法律嘅團體。咁所以我哋好多法律工作往往咧都係會徵求法律兩個專業嘅法律團體嘅意見，甚至我哋有唔少嘅法定嘅組織、諮詢嘅組織咧，亦都係好樂意委任由香港律師會推薦 嘅人員，包括好重要嘅一個係委任司法人員嘅司法人員推薦委員會啦，一個好重要嘅嚟到去管理有關香港法援制度嘅法律援助嘅服務局啦，都係有法律上讓律師會推薦委員嘅機制嘅。但係如果律師會已經變咗一個政治化團體咧，呢啲嘅關係我哋必須要重新審視。第二個問題關於抗疫，抗疫已經真係超過咗1年半啦。各國政府喺處理抗疫嗰方面咧，亦都係出盡唔同嘅政策嘅措施，亦都可能會有一啲唔同嘅取向，因為正如我哋喺抗疫之初都講啦。冇嘢係絕對嘅，當然公共衛生係至為重要，但係對於市民嘅接受程度啊，對於經濟民生嘅影響咧，亦都唔能夠完全忽視。咁所以往往都係要取得一個即係適當嘅平衡啦。但到目前為止，我哋聽得到嘅專業意見，無論嚟自世界衛生組織或者係國家嘅衛健委，以至到其他嘅衛生嘅當局咧，都係接種疫苗係一個唯一嘅出路。咁所以喺香港嚟講咧，我哋亦都係循住呢個方向咧去提升香港市民接種疫苗嘅比率。截至到昨晚為止，接受咗首劑嘅疫苗咧都只係55%。咁距離原本好早期講話，起碼要有70%啦，或許有個免疫屏障。或者琴日劉宇龍教授講，而家因為有個 Delta 嘅變種嘅病毒咧，傳播性係更加強，可能要去到80%、90%。咁所以呢個工作咧就係仍然繼續。儘管有啲地方接種率高咧，亦都係出現咗好多嘅 breakthrough 啦、突破嘅感染嘅個案啦，或者係感染個案嘅回升啦。但係專家都話俾我哋聽，接種咗疫苗，即使不幸再次感染咧，嗰個發病率嘅嚴重性都係比較低嚇，死亡率亦都會係低嘅。咁所以從嗰個保障公共醫療系統、保障個人嘅生命安全咧，接種疫苗仍然係一個值得廣大市民支持嘅做法。咁所以喺呢度咧，我再次呼籲全港市民咧要盡快去接種呢個疫苗。多謝。
下一條提問，左手邊紅色衫呢位。
Mrs. Lam, from South China Morning Post. So nearly 90,000 people has left Hong Kong since mid-2020, and now people are worried that the foreign companies could be leaving too with the anti-foreign sanctions law. So officials said the local legislative process would help the government to address their concerns. But how long would this process take? Would the LegCo be required to complete the process by the end of October? About 1,500 companies chose Hong Kong for their regional headquarters. Are you worried that many of them could be leaving with this new law? And if that happens, would Hong Kong continue to be known as an international financial center? My second question is on quarantine arrangements. So we know that 15 places will soon become high risk and require 21 days of quarantine. But when will the government implement the scientific committee's recommendation about 14-day quarantine for people from low and medium risk countries with antibody? And would the government also consider postponing the arrangement under which visitors from these countries only need 7 days of quarantine if they pass the antibody test at the airport? Is it possible that we can impose like a stricter ban for people visiting from low and medium risk countries? Thank you.
Thank you for the two questions. First of all, I realize that recently there have been a lot of discussion on people leaving Hong Kong, and this figure released, which was a figure released regularly on the so-called net inflow and net outflow, has stirred up some debate about this figure of 90,000. I do not want to sound defensive, but one has to look into this, how this figure was arrived at. It is a sort of net figure of the number of outflow minus the number of inflow. Yes, there may be an increase in the number of outflows, but you will also notice that we have a significant reduction in the number of people coming in, mainly from the mainland because of the travel restrictions. The number of one-way permit holders, that is mainlanders coming into Hong Kong for family reunion, has significantly reduced because of the travel restrictions. So we are nowhere near the figure used to be about, on average, 150 a day. So that is a factor that one should look into. But never mind those figures. As I said, I don't want to be defensive and to say that there is no person leaving Hong Kong for various reasons. My stance has always been Hong Kong people has freedom of movement. They have a free mind. They could decide where and when to leave Hong Kong or come back to Hong Kong, particularly for families with young children who may want children to have another form of education. So, but it is very important for Hong Kong to continue to be able to attract talents and to retain talents in Hong Kong. Of course, also to nurture local talents. And I can assure you that we are doing on every front on nurturing talents. We are continuing to invest in education, and we are even doing more on the STEM education because we do see innovation and technology as an emerging engine of growth for Hong Kong. There are two recent developments which may prove that Hong Kong remains very attractive. As you know, we have a quality migrant admission scheme that bring in talents from all over the world. There used to be a quota of 1,000, which was never used up previously. In my policy address, I think last year, I raised this quota in anticipation of our capacity and ability to recruit more quality migrants. I was told by the committee that there was a significant increase in the successful applicants under the quality migrant scheme. So in other words, more talents are now coming to settle in Hong Kong. The second incident was the scheme that I introduced last year in my policy address about a global STEM professorship scheme. So we are trying to recruit the very promising or very distinguished scientists from all over the world to come to Hong Kong to join us in this innovation and technology development. We have money for only a quota of 100. Universities nomination, this is, by the way, not an application or employment admission scheme. This is by nomination. We receive more than 100 nominations from the UGC-funded institutions, and the first batch of successful nominees exceeded 40 already. And many of them came from very distinguished universities all over the world. So while at the same time people choose to leave Hong Kong, I am pretty optimistic that with our fundamental strengths and the opportunities available upon integrating into the mainland development, particularly the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area, we will be able to recruit more talents. So similarly for foreign companies using Hong Kong as a regional headquarters, regional office, or setting up a local office, Hong Kong will continue to be an attractive destination. In recent interactions with the business chambers based in Hong Kong, I have this very strong feeling that their initial anxiety about the national security law has subsided. But you are right that the passing of the anti-foreign sanctions law by the National People's Congress Standing Committee and its likely application to Hong Kong by inclusion in Annex 3 may have generate other anxiety. So I said on this occasion last Tuesday that my advice and sort of opinion to the National People's Congress Standing Committee is for us to go through a local legislative process so that we could be in a better position to explain the purpose of this anti-foreign sanctions law and to take into account Hong Kong's actual situation before we prepare this piece of local legislation. At the moment, we don't have explicit timetable because the NPCSC has yet to make a decision on listing this anti-foreign sanctions law into Annex 3 of Basic Law for application to Hong Kong. But we have started some initial discussion on what the law should look like if there is going to be a piece of local legislation. And by the way, we do have local legislation to implement CPG decisions on UN sanctions. So it is not an entirely alien area that we do not know how to draft the law. But at this moment, I could not give you a timetable. But one will realize that the 6th-term Legislative Council only have 2 more months to go. They will go into prorogue by the end of October to prepare for the general election on the 19th of December. So, in my opinion, it will be an extremely tight timetable to rush a piece of legislation with the necessary consultation with stakeholders within this term of the Legislative Council. But that is, of course, my opinion at the moment, because I could not preempt the National People's Congress Standing Committee on its decision sometime this week. Now, on the quarantine arrangement, we are facing changing circumstances on a very frequent basis, especially with these so-called variants of concern and the prevalence of Delta in many places. Experts have told us that Delta is more infectious than other variants of concern. And that's why we need to adapt our policies, especially on the border control policies, to make sure that we are able to prevent the importation of Delta cases and the spread into the community. So what the experts have come to a view at the Joint Scientific Group meeting last night is they are recommending the government should reverse an earlier decision, again based on the advice in June, that antibody tests could be used as an instrument to reduce the quarantine period so that we could accommodate more aspirations of people to come back or to come in, because the 21-day or the 14-day designated hotel quarantine is quite a challenge for many people. So we announced a phase 1 based on that earlier expert advice to allow Hong Kong residents who have been fully vaccinated, then they will go for an antibody test, and with that test certificate valid for 3 months, they can go out and they come back with the test certificate, which is still valid, then they could reduce it to 7 days if they are not coming back from the high risk, that is now the Group A countries. This has been in place, and I understand many people have benefited from this arrangement. But exactly because of this arrangement, we are seeing breakthroughs. People who have been fully vaccinated but still being infected and confirmed positive while they were being quarantined, or in one case while they have left the quarantine hotel. So the experts have been asked to have this meeting last night, and they sort of advise us that with the prevalence of Delta in many places, it is better to err on the side of caution. So that means that we will not introduce a phase 2, which we have announced. In other words, for non-Hong Kong residents to get a certificate of antibody test in Hong Kong and then reduce a quarantine period. We may even have to suspend the phase 1 for Hong Kong residents. But for the details, I would leave it to the Secretary for Food and Health. I think the Bureau will issue a detailed statement later today in light of the Joint Scientific Group's advice. So this proves that it is not an exact science to deal with the COVID-19. We have to continuously review the situation together with the experts and take account of their advice to design our policies. I have to apologize to those people who have been inconvenienced or who have their plans disrupted as a result of this change in the use of the antibody test, but I hope they will understand that everything we are doing is to protect Hong Kong from another major outbreak that we have seen and we have suffered. We do not want to reverse our decisions on a frequent basis, and we have managed not to do so since the April 12 meeting that I announced this new direction. but sometimes in order to err on the side of caution, in order to prevent the spread of the disease, we have to do it. And this is why we are going to act in accordance with the experts' advice and announce the details later today.
今日最後一條，後邊嗰位男記者。
特首你好，中評社。最近本港外來輸入確診案例中咧，唔少人都係接種過2劑疫苗㗎啦。咁想問特首，關於接種疫苗可以縮短呢個檢疫期嘅安排，會唔會造成呢個外防輸入嘅漏洞？同埋特區政府會唔會進一步收緊呢個海外地區來港人士嘅檢疫要求 ？Thank you。
喺處理新冠疫情嘅過程裏邊呢，我哋時刻都係要緊記我哋必須要因時制宜。當喺外圍發生咗一啲嘅情況嘅時候呢，我哋要同專家商量啦，然後調整我哋嗰個政策。香港已經係結束咗我哋由舊年11月發生嘅第4波嘅疫情，咁所以喺今年4月呢，我哋亦都公布咗一個抗疫嘅新路向，就係我哋希望能夠維持到呢個局面，係唔需要嗰啲社交距離嘅措施呢時緊時鬆，亦都盡量呢可以俾翻香港市民有一啲機會外出同埋翻嚟嚇。咁所以喺當時呢，我哋喺6月嘅時候，亦都係得到專家嘅意見，認為一個血液嘅抗體嘅測試係有助於我哋更加可以知道呢一個人士呢係佢哋接受咗新冠疫苗之後呢，亦都係出現咗抗體嚇。咁所以可以將佢哋嗰個強制嘅指定酒店嘅檢測期呢，或者檢疫期呢，係縮短到去7天啊。呢個新嘅政策呢，第一期係適用於香港居民，佢喺香港接受咗疫苗嘅接種，做咗即係血液嘅抗體嘅檢測，有一個證明之後呢，佢係喺去外地翻嚟呢，如果唔係屬於即係Group A A 組嘅高危嘅地方呢，係可以將呢個檢疫期呢由14天減到去7天嚇。咁過去應該都有唔少嘅香港市民呢係因此呢係受惠嘅嚇。咁但鑑於我哋亦都發現呢，喺咁嘅情況之下，事實上亦都有一啲叫 breakthrough 一啲突破，就係話好似你提出啦，係接種咗疫苗，有晒抗體，但係翻嚟呢都喺檢疫期，甚至最近有一個呢係檢疫期以外呢係發現佢係受到感染嘅。咁所以我哋又需要即係因時制宜調校我哋嘅政策。所以昨天晚上呢，呢個聯合科學嘅委員會亦都係開咗會。開會嘅建議呢，就係鑑於呢個情況同埋外圍嘅地方呢，仍然係嗰個確診個案係上升嘅嚇。特別係有好多同我哋有緊密接觸嘅地方啦，譬如係歐洲啲國家啦，同埋美國啦。咁所以我哋就做咗一啲嘅。喺之前我哋已經做咗一啲嘅舉措呢，就係將15個國家呢係由 B 提升到 A。換句話說呢，只係香港居民已經完成接種呢，可以翻嚟香港，而且全部都要21天嘅。另外將一個國家係應該係澳洲呢，由 C 提升到係 B 嚇。咁今日我哋將會考慮埋昨天晚上專家對於呢個抗體測試是否仍然係穩妥成為一個減短抗疫期嗰個嘅基礎嘅意見之後呢，我哋今日亦都有啲公佈。公佈嘅方向呢都係會收緊嘅，即係話唔會再以一個抗體嘅陽性嘅基礎呢嚟到縮短嗰個嘅喺指定酒店嘅檢疫期。即係話咧，除咗喺即係最低風險嘅 Group C 而家得一個國家嘅啫，其他人咧都唔會少過14天嘅檢疫期㗎啦。希望能夠喺外防輸入嗰度咧就做得更加即係緊湊。但係我亦都唔會覺得早前咧係一個所謂漏洞，因為正如我所講，每一日我哋都要調校我哋嘅政策嚟到去應對市民有一定嘅訴求嚇，已經超過咗1年半嚇。咁所以對於每一次翻嚟香港21天、14天呢，事實上係市民係有啲嘅不耐煩啦嚇。 尤其是政府又鼓勵佢打針，佢又打晒針，原來都冇分別。咁但係而家又見到個情況係可能會惡化咧，所以又採取咗呢個行動。咁相信喺未來一段嘅日子咧，我哋都要繼續咁樣不斷檢視我哋嘅措施嚇，一有需要我哋就要作出一個調校嚇，令到香港咧可以唔需要出現新一波嘅疫情嚇。多謝大家。